Beverly Silverberg, welcome and so thrilled to have you in this 35th anniversary LGW Frontline conversation.
Thank you, Mahan. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you today.
So, Beverly, first things first, before we get to the LGW experience, how are you doing at this point of the pandemic? What's happening in your life?
Well, we moved into a retirement community on March 12th of 2020. On March 15th, everything shut down. We had moved here because we wanted to travel a little bit and be able to close the door to the apartment and head off. We wanted to take advantage of the swimming pools and the clubs and the theater and all this activity that we were anticipating, and everything shut down. So we had a long time to unpack our boxes.
It's everyone, we all had plans for certain things, and they all went away after the start of the pandemic. But over this time,
we're healthy and we're safe, and that's what's important.
You are also doing well, and you are looking great. Glenn Howard also says looking good, Bev. So Glenn, a dear friend who's also been involved in LGW, says hello to you.
Forever, yep.
So Beverly, how did you get involved with LGW in the first place? Why did you decide to choose do the signature program?
I have to admit, I went kicking and screaming all the way. At the time, I was the spokesperson for the Washington Metro, and our general manager, Carmen Turner, an amazing woman, was on this board that got together and decided there should be a group called Leadership Washington. And she was one of the founders, and she came to me and said, "You're going to be on this program." Then I found out that the program was like once a month and you couldn't opt out. And I said, "Carmen, you're kidding. How can I do this in my job?" And she said, "You'll find a way." And she was right. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So thank you, Carmen, looking down at us and probably smiling.
It is incredible, Beverly, because I had somewhat of a similar experience, and Lyles Carr was the person that twisted my arm to get involved in LGW. And I think a lot of us are thankful to the people that helped recruit us in that first place to LGW. Rick says, Carmen Turner also asked me to get involved in LGW. This is Rick Rybeck. But Hilda Mason wouldn't permit it.
Grandma. Hilda Mason was everyone's grandma. And she had very strong ideas about what to do and what not to do. She was quite a character. I'm sorry, Rick, but obviously you got in anyway.
So, Beverly, what was the signature program experience like for you? This was the third year of LGW, so early on in the experience. What was it like for you?
You know, it was an exposure to the region. That was something I'd never experienced really, which is strange because since I was the Metro spokesperson and we served Maryland, Virginia, the District of Columbia, and 8 local jurisdictions, you know, I thought I knew it all. Well, you know, when you learn how much you don't know is when you start learning stuff. And that was one of the biggest values to me. I'd end up going to meetings in the wilds of Virginia, you know, or we were off to Annapolis for our initial introduction to leadership, what was then known as Leadership Washington. And it was an exposure to issues of health, issues of transportation beyond my own little window of Metro. It was about governance. And I think it was, who was it that was talking about her experience in the police cars on night patrol. It was a phenomenal year and phenomenal exposure to a wide range of issues and of people. Let's see. Yeah, trying to come up with a name. But anyway,
Yeah.
as soon as I find it, I'll tell you.
You know, Beverly, I was reflecting on it this morning and responding to a question that part of LGW is that it gives us even greater empathy for understanding, whether it is with respect to people in different parts of the region, people with different backgrounds, people in different industries, uh, what other people have to deal with that are outside of the normal existence bubbles that in many instances we occupy in our lives. So LGW provides that for all of us. So when you went going through the signature program, but was there a moment or two that stick in your mind all these years later that you say, you know what, that moment became defining of the LGW experience for me?
Well, one of the things that I most appreciated about the Leadership Greater Washington experience was getting to know people that I never would have had an opportunity to meet. I love the fact that each class was designed to have a wide berth of people, whether it was business people, nonprofits, different ethnicities. I mean, all of that was such a gift to be able to experience this program with people who came with their own experiences and their own visions and their own emphasis. And so when they shared their ideas, it was a remarkable opportunity to expand your own horizon. And speaking of horizons, Bright Beginnings began out of Leadership Greater Washington. People saw a need. There were children that were homeless, preschool that had nowhere to go except the streets with their moms. And so Bright Beginnings began as a result of people in Leadership Washington identifying a problem and finding a solution. And that goes back to what you were saying about purpose. You know, the interesting thing to me is that people were, in the beginning, we're always trying to define, what are we? You know, there's a lot of navel gazing going on in those days. And it probably still continues. Are we an active organization, or are we passive organization, or, you know, and of course the beauty of the organization was that everyone was in this tent and they did not all agree on what they should be doing. So that's why, you know, people got together to do Bright Beginnings, because they wanted to take an active part. And that was fine, because being a catalyst for change was definitely part of the mission.
Yeah, that the organization has continued playing that role, and I think again, thanks to your guidance and people like you, we've tried to stay focused on purpose. Now, Beverly, post your signature program experience, you ended up serving on the board and serving as board chair. What got you so engaged to want to put up both with service on the board and then eventually board chair?
Because I believed in the mission. I was really hooked, you know. I felt like Leadership Washington had given me so much, that I wanted to be sure that that experience was available to other people. And so having that opportunity given to me, I felt like I had to pass it on. So, it was a no-brainer to be on the board. And although I'll tell you, chairing the board at a time when we were deep in the hole looking for money was no picnic. But you do what you have to do, and asking for money was never one of my favorite things to do, but I learned how to do it, and that was a challenge. I was remembering who mentioned Bright Beginnings. It was Marty Kendrick, who I think was also interviewed and was talking about at the beginning and how not only the Board of Trade, but the junior
league,
the junior league came and really were the impetus for getting this program going.
So Beverly, many years have gone by since you went through the signature program, and even since your board service and service as board chair, but you have stayed actively engaged and involved in Leadership Greater Washington. Why?
Because it's a really good organization, Mahan, and it's had wonderful leaders like yourself. It's having Doug, I think, was an amazing opportunity for this organization to grow in ways that I really wouldn't have expected initially. But I think Doug has done a magnificent job. The program year, all of the interviews and inviting people to come and share their stories. He's done a wonderful job, and he's hired excellent people to work in the organization as well. And I think we're on a very firm financial footing now, which was not the case in the early years. We didn't know where the next dollar was coming from. So this organization deserves to grow and share its wonderful legacy with this region. I think the region is much better and much stronger as a result of the people who have gotten to know one another as individuals. I mean, that's one of the great advantages of LGW. You come in contact with, in our day, it was like 50 people. Now it's up to what, 60 or 70 people in a program year. And they're people that you probably never would have met, never would have gotten to talk to, never would have understood without, when Leadership Washington people get together, and there are all these hugs and they're sincere. There are all of these, wow, I haven't seen you in 5, 10, 15 years, and yet you pick up right where you left off. And that's a tribute to the program, I think.
It is outstanding, Beverly. And then for the signature program, actually for a few years, the size of the program had been expanded, partly because of the finances of the organization. Fortunately, because the finances are under control, we've reduced the size to a target of mid-50s, so 55.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, because we want it to be a real significant experience for people. We don't want to just put extra people in there for the resources, because that's not of value to the individuals participating and to the community. And to the other point that you made, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For a while, when the organization was involved just on survival, then it couldn't focus as much on impact.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are able to think through the connections and the impact that those connections can have. So when you reflect on LGW and where it can go in the future to even expand its impact, now that we've had a couple of thousand people participate in the program, we have 700 plus 2,000 actively involved in some shape, form, or another. Where can LGW and its impact go from Beverly's perspective?
It's an interesting question, Mahan. I think the future of this organization builds upon its past. I think the fact that everyone that's gone through the program understands that creating a region where people are able to do not only for themselves, but for each other, it can improve the lives of the people that live here. And that's what I see as the future of this organization. And the fact that there are that the signature program covers such areas as health and safety, education, transportation, governance. All of these are critical to the well-being of the people that live in this region. So having these leaders who know one another, who can call on each other, who can do good things together to improve the lives of those who live here, I think that's a very worthwhile future for Leadership Washington.
And that's part of the goal in continuing to, what you mentioned, build on the understanding and the heritage of the organization, which is one of the wonderful things in having people like you, Barbara Davis Blum, Dana Stebbins actively involved, Pat Matthews now is serving on the board. So people that were part of the initial cohort, in essence, of individual leaders involved in LGW, keeping our grounding and our roots as we continue to try to aspire to do more, because the needs with respect to the community, the divides with respect to the community have become bigger. So LGW has even a bigger challenge ahead of us, but we've got the right people involved in it. Now, the other thing, Beverly, is you have spent your life focused in one way, shape, form, or another, working with the media in public relations. That entire industry has also shifted dramatically over your involvement with LGW. How has that shifted, and how does that impact our community?
Wow. You say dramatic, you're absolutely right. Not only is it dramatic, it's traumatic. The change from the old school media. What was it I heard today on NPR? They called it legacy media. And I'm thinking, what is legacy media? And they're saying newspapers, journals, magazines, TV, radio, that's legacy media. Well, I was brought up on legacy media, but social media has just taken off. I mean, it is a phenomenon. And it reminds me of Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, the best of times and the worst of times. It's absolutely the best of times because with a click of a button, you have everything available to you. That same click of a button, and you get all of this misinformation and disinformation and just outright lies. And trying to sort through that is quite the challenge for people today. I used to teach a course when I was consulting, and I would call it Managing Media Mania. Well, today's media mania is very, very different and so much harder to try and manage, because the first thing I used to tell people that I was doing media training with is, you have to tell the truth.
those are the good old days, Beverly.
The good old days. And I said, you have to tell the truth because they'll catch you in a lie and then you'll be in real trouble. But we know where that's gone. Anyway, yeah, the landscape has changed. There are many more opportunities for direct communications with clients, with students. I mean, this whole past year, my grandchildren were Zooming their education, and one did really well and one did not. And so it's a phenomenal opportunity to increase your outreach. And yet it's also very scary because someone can ruin your reputation in a minute. You know, they just put out a lie and it's going to be believed by some people. And how do you get your reputation back? So what I've come to understand is that people will believe what they want to believe. And it's up to the rest of us to help people understand what's true, what's right. You know, I'm hoping that the moral values that people bring with them will help them navigate this new communication world.
So do you think, Beverly, LGW and the conversations we have has a role to play, at least within the community we touch, with respect to that?
Absolutely. I mean, again, you have a network, and how you communicate with this network. It doesn't have to be partisan, you know. People, you build on the trust that this organization has created. At least from my point of view, that's what I have seen, that when people get to know one another at a basic level, when they get to trust one another, when they can believe that what that person is saying and believing, even if you don't agree with it, but at least be willing to share your thoughts and why you feel the way you do, then I think you have an opportunity to create a base of understanding. And that's one of the values, I think, of Leadership Washington, creating trust among people so that you can go and create a better region.
It is important, Beverly. I struggle with it in my mind as I see our society and our communities separate even more, even with respect to families. I was at a LGW member dinner last night, and we were having this kind of conversation where people were saying, I can't even associate anymore with certain parts of members of my own family
Right.
because we can't communicate anymore. And one of the concerns I have, and I want to get your thoughts and perspectives on, is that in order for us to truly be able to change the community, we need to bring people to the table that we don't agree with, that we don't align with. And that's becoming harder and harder. And I'll speak for myself. I have a harder time. I'm like, I don't want to associate with you. So how can we as an organization become one that actively seeks people that might not necessarily align with LGW at the beginning, where we can have open dialogue and conversations for the benefit of the greater community?
You know, you just reminded me of one of the offshoots of Leadership Washington was that I joined the board of Women of Washington. And Women of Washington took its lead, I think, from some of the things that Leadership Washington did by trying to get people to hear different points of view. And I remember specifically, we had a program on what else? Abortion, a very hot topic for women, a very important topic. And we were concerned that there might be antagonism in the audience. And so we deliberately set out to create an atmosphere of respect. And the moderator, Tara Sonnenschein, was very specific as she opened the program, saying, we know that people have very strong, sincere, heartfelt opinions, and we would like to respect everyone's opinion. And we would like to share those opinions. And so we're going to, as I moderate this, understand that respect is key. And you know what? It was a really amazing exchange of ideas with no one beating up on anyone else or calling them murderers or doing all of the things that we were afraid might happen, because the tone was set. And that's one of the things that, again, it goes back to respect. Another organization that I was on the board of was NCCJ, which started out as the National Conference for Christians and Jews. Well, then they discovered that there are more than just Christians and Jews in the world. And one of our presidents was God, I have to think about his name, but he was Muslim. And we changed the name, wanted to keep the initials. And so we called it the National Conference for Community and Justice. Thank you, Glenn Howard. It is Ibrahim Mumin. And Ibrahim has become a wonderful friend, and his wife, Carol. They do tremendous work in the community. She's a playwright. And it's a privilege for me to have gotten to know them. But would I have been on that board? Probably not. I was on the board of the Greater Washington Urban League, and I got to know, I'm having trouble with names, you'll have to forgive me. There are just so many up there, but it was a marvelous opportunity to get to know what was happening in the African-American community. So it was all because of Leadership Washington.
And it does take a lot of effort, Beverly. That Beverly Hutnut says that's so important to bring diverse views around the table. That has to include more diverse political membership, in my humble opinion, she says. And Beverly Hutnut, I don't know if you've seen, Dave, I was reading a couple of surveys that parents at this point mind their children marrying someone of a different ethnicity or different religion, much less so than they mind their children marrying someone of the opposing party. So if they're a Republican marrying a Democrat or a Democrat marrying a Republican. So for whatever some of those surveys are worth, is that it does take effort, Beverly, for us to be mindful of the fact that we do have a purpose that we need to stay clear on. At the same time, to achieve our greater purpose, we need to, as you said, try to truly bring diversity to the table, which comes in all forms, shapes, and sizes.
Yep, I agree. It's a lot of it is about who you trust and how you gain trust. And I think that's one of the tremendous values of the LGW experience.
So continuing to build on the LGW experience, Beverly, again, reflecting on where we are at this moment with all the changes in the community, whether it is changes you mentioned in the media, it's changes with respect to the divisions that exist within the community on the political front, whether it is the income disparities that exist, all the issues that are happening. What are the places, the roles, the ways that LGW can continue uh, achieving its purpose the way you saw it presented from the beginning of the organization?
I think it's on the right track, Mahan. I think that bringing people together is the greater minds for a greater purpose. Isn't that the, do you know how many we've been through? But that's a good one, greater minds for a greater purpose. You bring people together who are proven leaders in their own field and expose them to people who are leaders in their fields, and make sure that they have a safe environment to share their beliefs, their hopes, their aspirations for themselves personally, for the organization, and for the greater region about them. This is how Leadership Greater Washington has thrived to today. And I think it will carry it on to the future, because the people that are in this organization seem to care very much about this organization. You named quite a number of the early members who are still active, like Lyles. I'm delighted that he is going to be honored. He deserves to be honored. He has cared about this organization, has nurtured it, has invited many strong leaders into the organization and helped them grow, help them with their vision, help them with their need to get good people in their organizations. I mean, that's one of the things that when I left Metro and I started my own company, who were my initial clients? Leadership Washington people. It was people who knew me through the organization, and I was able to then build my business. And that's one of the offshoots and values of the organization to an individual. But the greater purpose, the greater good, the bringing together people. I mentioned the boards that I was on. It was a privilege for me to be able to serve on those boards and to help them with their mission. So yeah, I see this organization expanding, just growing, and it's like you throw a rock in the water and the ripples go all the way out, and the ripples continue. And the more people you bring in, the more the ripples grow.
And lots of positive ripples. So Beverly, as you reflect back, who might be some individuals throughout the past 30 plus years from LGW that have played a role in your life over these years?
There are too many to mention, and I worry that if I mention a few of them, I will have missed so many. But I have to mention Artist Hampshire Cowan, because she was in my class, and I just feel so privileged to know her. And of course, Linda Rabbit was in our class, and the year that we had our initial year, she was out of a job. And now she's got a multi-million-dollar national corporation. And she's just a phenomenal woman. She's hosted many of our class reunions in her home. Howard Stone, my Prince George's County connection. Although we moved out of the county after 45 years to a retirement community, my roots are in Prince George's County, and Howard and I have done a lot of projects together. Again, it's been a privilege to get to know him. Wayne Curry was I think he got his foot in the door of politics largely with the help of the Leadership Washington community. And it was a small community in those days. And a lot of the people that are in Prince George's County government have some of their roots in Leadership Washington. So I know I'm missing so many people, but
it's a lot of these relationships, Beverly, play a big role over the years. The other thing that was unique and we want to continue including as part of LGW is that, especially the first few years, you interacted with the other classes quite a lot.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we were the third, and we knew everybody in the first and the second.
Which, by the way, sorry to interrupt.
You're not going to ask me.
What was the name of the third class?
Nobody asked me about that. I can't believe that they actually named us that. I was furious, but that's what it is. Boring but bonded. And you know why? Because the first two classes were always out drinking with one another. And we were not of that same stripe. So they told us we were boring, and we said, yeah, but we're bonded.
That boring and bonded that bonding has lasted all these years later. That's what I had to ask you about that. But you were saying about the cross-class connections.
Yeah. Well, we got to know one another, and we really got to care about one another, and we learned from one another. And that's what the organization is all about, in my opinion. When I talked to Doug initially about doing this, he asked me an interesting question about lessons learned. And I told him, or I may have planned to tell him, that one of the most important lessons that I ever learned was from my father when I was in college. I brought home a school newspaper, and the headline story was about a program called Experiment in International Living. And it was a summer program where the students got to go abroad and live with a family and get to know a country. And my father said to me, well, have you done your application yet? And I said, oh, come on, Dad. You know how many people there are in this school? What are my chances of ever getting it? He said, there's 0 if you don't apply. So, he rode me until I wrote the applications. Well, the end of the story. I ended up going to Israel for the summer. I had a wonderful experience. Part of what I had to do when I came back was to do a slideshow and go around to different schools and talk about the experiment in international living and what I had learned and who I had seen and what I had done. And that kind of led me into my career of communications. So I'm that lesson I learned about don't defeat yourself. And then I recently read a quote from Wayne Gretzky: you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that to me is a life lesson that I'm very grateful that my father gave me over half a century ago.
What a wonderful lesson your father gave you, Beverly, and what a wonderful opportunity it's been for this organization to benefit from your involvement, contribute to your development through the signature program experience, and then through you contributing back both to LGW and to the many different organizations in the community that you have impacted, both based on these relationships at LGW and some of the purpose that LGW brings to us and brought to you. That this is why, in my view, these conversations are really important. If we don't know where we have come from, and if we don't understand the stories of what have made this organization what it is today, then we cannot build to the future impact. So it's so wonderful getting a chance to hear some of your thoughts and perspectives, having you continue to advocate on behalf of purpose for this organization and its impact on the community. Really appreciate you joining the Frontline's 35th anniversary conversation and continuing to be such a big supporter of Leadership Greater Washington. Thank you so much, Beverly.
Thank you. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you, Mahan.